We do have the august presence of Dr. Jitendra Singh, Honorable Minister of State, Science and Technology and Earth Sciences, Government of India. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us at the SDG Summit. We all know of him as a multifaceted personality, and it is only befitting that we now hear from Dr. Jitendra Singh himself. So let's have a huge round of applause. Let's pack it up with a punch. Let's have a powerful round of applause to welcome the dynamic Dr. Jitendra Singh. If I could please invite you, sir, on stage to share your valuable thoughts with the august gathering.
Good evening. At the outset, I have to thank the Times Group and the organizers for having me once again over here. Each time I'm here, it's a learning experience, and I must confess I go back wiser than before. And therefore, I hope I look forward to an equally rewarding experience this morning as well. It's a privilege to be a part of this 6th edition of the SDG Summit. Now, I think I hardly need to reiterate that as far as this government headed by Prime Minister Modi is concerned, sustainable goals and the concerns related to most of these issues have been very high on the priority, high on the agenda. And also because India today is increasingly assuming a global role. And therefore, our parameters have to be global, our benchmarks have to be global, also our strategies have to be global. And that's not only because it's our stake, because the world now expects that from us. Today, world looks up to us with a lot of expectation, also with a lot of esteem. Gone are the days when India was hardly taken seriously, and it was general opinion that either we were indifferent to such concerns, or we were ignorant, or maybe we were not too deeply involved in this, but no longer so. In fact, in many of these concerns, we are now taking a lead. And therefore, it's not only a challenge that we have to live up to, it's also a commitment. And ever since Prime Minister Modi has taken over in the last 10 years, since 2014, it has become increasingly important for India not only to be an equal player, but also sometimes offer cues for others to follow, which is more than evident in the last 10 years. For example, if you take a simple instance of the space sector, the Indian Space Research Organization, or the ISRO, was formed in 1969, which is the year which has gone down in the history as the year when Americans landed the first human being on the surface of the moon, called Neil Armstrong. And we were just being born. But today, we have landed on the southern polar moon before anybody else. And those who were ahead of us are now waiting for our inputs, for our cues to carry forward their programs. So I am saying so is that there's a huge, huge departure, which would be appreciated by those who have seen those times and also seeing these times. There was a time about, say, 2 decades back, 3 decades back, that we were mostly a decade or two behind other countries as far as our technology is concerned. I think, again, the simplest example of that is that the television, which happened in the US in 1950s, and nowadays most of you are also enjoying those presidential TV debates because the presidential election is going on in USA, and that is the time when the presidential candidate debates capture the entire slot. The famous election of 1960 was determined as far as the outcomes are concerned by the TV debate when John Kennedy turned the tables on Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon was a formidable candidate, but because of his oratorial skills, his charisma, and his screen presence, Kennedy could carry the day. And here in India, in 1960, we neither knew what is TV nor the debate. The TV happened in India only, I think, in 1970s, that too by a weekly Chitrahar, which was available for people living in Delhi, else as the country, that too was not available. Where this So we have to realize that when we understand what is our commitment today, what is our responsibility today as far as the world arena is concerned. Today we are among the 4 or 5 nations of the world, or maybe shall I say, we are part of that elite league which is into quantum technology. We have officially launched Mission Quantum Technology last year. We are possibly the first in the world, and that has got directly to do with the subject this evening, to have launched a bioeconomy policy, which happened just about 2-3 months back, Bio E3. That means biotechnology for economy, biotechnology for environment, biotechnology for employment. Because it's a considered view of the economists across the globe that the next industrial evolution is going to be bioeconomy driven, just as the last one was IT driven in the 1990s. And there is possibly going to be a huge, huge paradigm shift in economy from the manufacturing to recycling, regeneration, synthesis, and circulation. So the entire paradigm is going to change just as it happened in the 1990s. Nobody could have visualized that would happen. But we are not waiting for it to happen. Earlier the tendency was to learn from the success stories of the others and then emulate them. Today we are ready to take a plunge. And therefore we are among the first. So even if you talk of bioeconomy, we were just about $10 billion in 2014 before this government came in. Today we are about $130 billion. We've gone 13 times high. The projection is that we will be $300 billion. And we are among the first to have gone in for the recycling of the biofuels, because our entire dependence on the petroleum products makes us dependent on the petroleum-rich countries. And if you have to get rid of that, we very fondly talk of Viksit Bharat and all those fanciful goals. But if you have to actually achieve that, you have to reduce your dependence on others. And it is again through this area of biotechnology and bioeconomy that we would be able to create resources outside the petroleum sector to meet our increasing needs, and therefore we will no longer be dependent. Maybe others only. So you can understand how important this issue becomes to us, and therefore, to put it in a nutshell, because for the paucity of time, our commitment specifically is at both levels to reduce the greenhouse emissions, A, and B, to increase our non-fossil energy, fuel, resources. And we are not making any vague complaints, because the era of talking without evidence no longer exists, and you're not taken seriously for that. We are actually now in a position to lay targets for us. For example, we've laid down for us that in 2030, we would be reducing our greenhouse emissions by 30 to 40%, and we would be increasing the non-fuel energy capacity by 500 gigawatt. And 2070 is the year when we have set the net zero target for ourselves. And therefore, this is a concern. And may I say so, because I've been introduced as a representative of the government, but this actually is a concern of each and every citizen. You can't leave this subject. It's too serious a subject to be left to government. I would rather say like that. Each one of us has stake. And even if you have to go beyond where we are today, this demarcation between the government and the non-government sector has to be done away with. It has to be a very close integration of academia, research, industry, startups, and of course the government. Because when we cite the example of the developed countries, we were conveniently keeping ourselves oblivious of the fact that they didn't have these demarcations. For example, when we spoke about space, we compared ourselves with NASA, but never realized that NASA had more than 70-80% of its resource on the non-government sector, which we have started only in the last 3-4 years. And the results are amazing. We were just one digit startup till 4 years back. Today we are 300 space startups, some of them world class. Some of them started their own rocket manufacturing unit, the first of its kind in the entire subcontinent of Southeast Asia. So what I'm trying to say is that this demarcation has to go away to introduce ourselves as a government or non-government, because we have to learn to grow together. And more important than that is that we also develop that kind of a behavior. There's something called economic behavior, social behavior, working behavior. In fact, incidentally, about 6 years back, there was a Nobel Prize in economics on the subject of economic behavior. So we have to learn to live with each other, learn to also synergize each other. Only this morning somebody was talking to me and I said, the irony that we went through was that since we had a lot of feudal legacy, so for many years we were skeptic about each other. The private sector always looked about the government sector as a bunch of bribe takers, a corrupt lot who would not move the file without their hands being greased. And the government sector always thought of the private sector as a bunch of fleecers or black marketeers. And then I gave them a fanciful example. I was addressing students this morning. I said, in my time when we got into a bus, because of course now there are many other means of transport, तो उस बस में महात्मा भी बैठता था, ठग भी बैठता था, साधु भी बैठता था, चोर भी बैठता था. और अगर रास्ते में बस कभी खराब हो जाती, उन दिनों आखिर अक्सर हुआ करता था, टायर पंचर हो जाता, तो सभी उतर के साथ साथ धक्का लगाते, महात्मा जी भी लगाते और डाकू भी लगाता, because the common goal was to reach that destination. So easier talking about that fanciful destination of 2047 India, but how do we reach there? So we have to reach there. The more synergized we are, more successful we would be. And to be specific, as far as the government is concerned, our policy framework envisages National Action Plan on Climate Change. And the important components of this, because I've been invited here as a minister more than a resource person, so I have to do some government talking as well. And the important components of the National Action Plan on Climate Change include a national solar mission. We are the first to have set up a solar alliance, which again has laid down a target of 100 gigawatts in the very near future. Second is the National Wind Energy Mission, where we hope to explore our wind resources. Third is the National Mission for Energy Efficiency. Fourth, the National Mission for Sustainable Habitat, which also involves the energy efficiency. Fifth being the National Water Mission, which is focusing on the conservation of water and minimizing wastage of water, etc. Sixth being the National Mission for Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem. Incidentally, now this is for the first time that we have started looking towards the indigenous resources which had so far remained unexplored or underexplored. We have a huge range of Himalayas which has remained unexplored. Very recently, I'm glad that it's also part of the Ministry of Science and Technology. We come out with something which is popularly being described as the purple revolution, the lavender cultivation, which has given a new genre of agri startups. Almost 3,000, 4,000 youngsters are already into it, making a good fortune out of it. These aroma resources, because they were already there, they have a huge, and these success stories have made success because they had an early industry linkage. So it's my considered view that if you have to have a sustainable startup, when you talk of sustainable goals, you also talk of sustainable startups. It is fanciful counting how many startups. Of course, we've gone from 350 to now nearly 2 lakh in the last 10 years. But how to sustain them? To sustain them, you need to have a strong industry linkage. And this purple revolution story is also a part of that. So we have started exploring that. The other unexplored resource is going to be our marine resources. We have a 7,500 long kilometer coastal area beginning from Bengal, Gujarat, Odisha, going up to Maharashtra, Gujarat on the west, which has remained again unexplored. We have a huge wealth of minerals, metals, biodiversity inside that. And when that gets optimally explored, it's not only going to contribute to the economy of the country as we have risen from number 10 to number 5 or fragile 5 to first 5, it's also going to contribute hugely to the overall economy of the world as such. And that's why we have an ocean called Indian Ocean, because our ancestors more than us realized the wealth of lying inside. They named it after the. I was telling the other day a group of visitors from Australia. I said, your country is known as Australia, your continent known as Australia, your island known as Australia, but your ocean not known as an Australian ocean, because my ancestors were smart enough to leave this queue for me. So that is again going to add to our sustainable goals. Another mission is the National Mission on Agriculture Adaptation, as we are looking now for the resilient agricultural strategies. And then, of course, the National Mission on Green India, where we are already making a headway. We were among the first to come up with the hydrogen automobiles. One of our institutes in Pune, the National Chemical Lab, along with the Tatas, had contributed to that. So that's again a success story based on the public-private participation. Secondly, in the government sector, we have certain sector-specific initiatives. In the energy sector for the renewable energy, as I was just elaborating, in the transportation, in relation to the electrical vehicles, in the agriculture for the climate resilient crops, in the urban sector for the sustainable urban planning, which is, I don't need to elaborate because that is subject for a separate session altogether, water resources, conservation, etc., and of course the disaster management. And as I said, it would require participation of each and every citizen. Because sometimes one may tend to feel that maybe I have no stake in this has nothing to do with it. But it's becoming such pervasive that finally, when the stake takes over, then you realize. Because I remember till about 10, 15 years back, there were many among the elite even in the Delhi sectors, who would look at a mobile with contempt. ऐसा भी ये क्या time waste निकाला आपने? Now they are the ones totally glued down to this because they have discovered the utility of it. And it's virtually entered every Indian household and every Indian's pocket. So those of us who still feel that we are not connected, not concerned with it, will soon be made to realize when these issues overcome us. And of course, more so because now, as I said in the beginning, India today looks up to us to take a lead. And we are the ones, in fact, who also made a mention of it in the COP movement. And therefore, now it's no longer, as I said, a commitment. It's also no longer an option. It's a compulsion. It's the only way forward for all of us. And we have to achieve or realize that goal of whatever India 2047, we have no other option but to be a part of it. I mean, you have to live up to the global parameters. Like, it's good you play gully danda, you play kabaddi, and you excel. But unless you excel in cricket, you don't make a mark globally. So now, if you have to make a mark globally, you have to live up to the global parameters. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll end briefly with this. Thank you very much.